Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I am AmalgamAsh, and this is the map editor of RPG developer BAKIN. When you first open the map editor, you are presented with a tooltip screen that you can choose not to show next time you open the map editor, but you'll only see this once, so let's read it. This is the main screen of BAKIN, where the maps are made and events are placed to create the stage for the game. You can create maps by selecting terrains, objects, and events from the stamps palette on the right side of the screen and placing them on the map. If you do not see the stamps you need, go to Resource Management in the Master menu on the left side of the screen to add them. The Map Settings palette allows you to specify the map's initial settings, such as its size and the background music it plays, as well as rendering settings that change the appearance of the screen. The Tools palette contains a collection of different functions for creating maps. The Map List palette contains all the maps you have created. You can also create new maps in this Map List palette. The Placed List palette is a list of objects and events placed on a map. You can also select objects on the map and change parameters such as scaling and angles from here. The leftmost portion of the screen is the Master menu that provides access to BAKIN's various tools. The various buttons at the bottom of the screen are switches that control the movement of the various tools in the Tools palette and the objects displayed on the map editor. Try changing the settings as needed. Each palette can be repositioned as desired. Try to arrange them in a way that is easy for you to work with. If you are not sure what to do, please refer to the manual on the RPG Builder BAKIN official site. This is an earlier version of RPG developer BAKIN. Some of the terminology here has been changed. So we'll click OK. And now I'm going to maximize the screen. And this is, truthfully, where you're going to spend a lot of time making your game, creating your levels, setting down your events. The layout is very familiar if you've worked with Smile Game Builder. It's almost an identical layout. Over to the left here, you see the Master menu, which you can choose to hide and show. We have the Map Editor up top, then the Resource Manager, the Database, Game Definition, Layout Adjustment, Camera Registration, Variable Labels, and Sprite Tool. In the center, we have our cursor. We can zoom in and out of our map with the scroll wheel. Cursor is very high visibility this time around. If you hold the middle mouse button and move your mouse around, you can pan your camera. And if you hold down right click and move your mouse around, you can rotate your camera along 2 axes. We can see our player character that we've chosen from the last episode where we went through the builder's included wizard. And we can place him anywhere on the map just by clicking and dragging him, of course. This time, it seems he doesn't need to be placed tile perfect. He will actually move in quadrants. So actually, the start position doesn't have to be directly in the center of a tile, but rather can be on the edge or corner of a tile as well. Up at the top, we have options for saving. We have a file menu, an edit menu, a view menu, a functions menu, an option for test play, and a help button. Don't forget the location of this help button. And by the way, you do have the ability to click and drag the various palettes, as they are called. When you do this, you can see icons here and at the other edges of the map screen, for example. And if you hover over and release your mouse button, you can actually place your tool set in the desired location. So this is a huge win, I think, for this engine, being able to place your tools anywhere you like. You can easily emulate other workspaces from other engines to give yourself the best possible workflow. After you've dragged a palette away from its pinned position, you can click the pin button and it will go right back where it was. I'm going to place it back where I found it because I actually prefer it to be right here. So this is the Tools palette, and it includes methods for selecting. We have the Trace Select and the Fill. We have the Elevation Selector, or Select based on elevation. And we have the Type Selection. These seem to function the same way right now, but if these tiles were different, it would select all of the tiles that were of the same type at the same elevation. We also have our familiar Pen tool, our Fill bucket, and our Eraser. We have a Dropper tool this time, and a Terrain Raise and Lower pen. We can just raise our terrain. The terrain does not raise in entire block heights. Now we have much more shallow depths with which we can work. and this is going to allow us to sculpt some beautiful maps. You can still right-click on a tile. To get this context menu, you can raise your tiles by 1 level or lower them by 1 level. You can align them at higher or lower elevations, make the elevation 0. You can actually make your tiles into slopes or stairs or corners or make them flat. So we'll just see what happens when we do that. If we click on Make It Slope, we have the option to set our influential elevation, which is going to be sort of the pitch of that slope and what direction it's facing. So if we hit OK, we have changed our tile to a slope. That is a very powerful tool. We're going to see if we can undo this action, and we can. We can just as easily make these stairs, and if we set a lower influential elevation, it will decrease the height that the stairs or slope will be. You can still right-click on tiles to make them the starting point, and then you'll see your player character move to reflect that. You can still group and ungroup tiles, and you can still cut, copy, paste, and delete. Next, we have tools that will raise and lower the selected terrain, as well as an X and Y axis rotation that will operate on selected, presumably objects. And we can make things slopes, stairs, corners, or flat from here, as well as group, ungroup, make starting points, copy, paste, and delete. You can also undo and redo. However, there's a new option here in the Tools menu, not present from SGB, and that's the light. So if we actually click on that and then click on the map, we have placed a light source. You can see the light reflected in the materials on the tile. We can place more than one light, indeed, and we can change the position of the lights, such as the height, by clicking and dragging on the widget arrows. This is a very exciting feature, and I think it's going to make a lot of games very interesting. Right-clicking on a light source doesn't seem to allow us to change anything about it, so we'll explore that more later. Now, the Stamps palette contains 3 tabs: Terrains, Objects, and Events, and it looks like everything is separated into subfolders or subcategories, and it looks like we also get the visual menu on what to select, as well as a preview of what it is we're selecting at the bottom. You can actually use a search term this time to filter your results. So if I type in wood and then check which folders I want to search in, and then press the filter button, we can see all of the different wood tiles that are included with BAKIN. And if I want a brick tile, that will return all of the brick tiles that are available in BAKIN. Now, just for fun, I'd like to put down a little bit of lava, and I'm amazed to see that lava actually has its own light emission. So you can actually see that your light effects, any changes in the materials, will be reflected right here in the editor. No need to test play to see that. And before we continue, let's go over to the left, check out these 3 kind of hard to see options. The map list. This is kind of a submenu to the map editor. You can switch between your various maps here, and this would be very similar to the map list in Smile Game Builder. There is also the placed list. You can see all of the different things that you've placed on your current map, and the list of common events. If you accidentally click the X and make the menu completely disappear, you can go back to the View tab and reopen the menus, and they'll go right back to where they were. If I want the map list to be back where it was, I'll just hit the pin icon, and now I have my 3 options yet again. And if I wanted to go back to the top of that list, I can just drag out the other menus, replace them, and repin them, and they'll appear in a sequential order. So my map list is back on top where I want it. To continue, I would like to draw your attention to the bottom of the screen. On the left-hand side, we have a marquee scrolling tooltip. On the right-hand side, we have a lot more tools. The first of which is Selection Target. You can actually select only terrains or only objects this time around. By default, this is set to terrains and objects. That is sure to make game development less frustrating. You can also choose to operate in the XZ, YX, or ZY axes. It is XZ by default. Next are options for the manipulator. We have options for position adjustment, angle adjustment, and scale adjustment. So what does this do? Well, when you select any of the objects on your map, such as these lights that we've placed down, you can use the arrows representing each of the axes to manipulate the objects. By default, this is set to position, so moving the object on your map or translating it is possible using the position arrows. If you select rotation, these will change to circles that represent rotational axes, and you can change the rotation of your light. Now that doesn't seem to do anything here because the light source is constant, but if you set down an object, which I guess we can set down an object really quick for this purpose, then you can change the rotation of the object. And look at that. It's in pretty exacting degrees, fractions of a degree even. That's right, you do not have to set things down flat in BAKIN. You can have everything at an angle. Look at the reflection on that roof. Beautiful. And that is just a low poly Smile Game Builder asset. We're still working with basically default materials in this brand new engine. Finally, we can choose scale adjustment, and this is one of the most exciting features of BAKIN. When you select scale adjustment and then select an object, the arrows become these blocks. And if you've ever worked in a program like Blender or Unity, you know what this means. The blocks will change the scale of the object when you click and drag. In this case, we can make our light source actually bigger. We can make our church bigger. We can scale it out. We're actually making it so big that it thinks it needs to rest on the terrain that I've raised. So it's changed the position of it slightly. But now our church is huge. You can invert your assets by going in the opposite direction, and we can shrink our church way, way, way down and essentially create a model. This means no more having to import multiple models of different sizes. Now you are simply allowed to dynamically scale the object in the editor on the map. All right, so we'll go back to position adjustment and leave that as the default. You can toggle snapping to grid or showing the grid. And with grid snap off, we are actually allowed to place our starting character anywhere. We don't have to snap to the edges of the tiles, as I showed you before. Things are no longer bound to tiles. And this is one of the most important features of BAKIN, releasing ourselves from the tile restrictions. All right, and next we have a button to allow camera from above. Just a really easy way to set your camera. You can also click on the various XYZs on the widget in the corner, and this will give you an instant view of the top, the side, the front of your map. You can toggle the lighting effects on or off for your map. So if you're wanting to know what things look like without the emissions from the objects or tiles, you can choose to display or hide the lights and particle icons. In this case, we can actually remove all of our light icons, but keep the lights, of course. And although we haven't placed any enemies or set any regions for enemies to appear, you can actually toggle the visibility of those regions on and off as well. Now let's take a look at all of the tiles and objects included with the map editor. The sample game folder of the terrains stamp only includes 4 of these block tiles. The reserved folder contains 3 subfolders. Color block 128, which refers to the size of the texture on the block, meaning these are higher res, and you can see that just by placing it on the map. And 64, and those are the older 64 by 64 resolution textures. You could choose a style and stick with it for your game. Next, we have objects, we have buildings, we have various buildings. And if your buildings or other objects, FBX files, have animation, that will be reflected on the map. Look at the smooth animation of that windmill, as well as our new fountain. But that's not all. BAKIN also comes with a huge selection of plants, flowers, trees, hedges, mushrooms, stumps, vines. Something called terrains that actually set a high poly model onto the map. It takes up quite a bit of space as well. Here's an even bigger one. And it looks like we have big terrains as options. And when we place these on the map, Then you've got terrain as far as your player's eye can see. It is awesome to see assets like this included with the engine this time around. We still have our outdoor assets from SGB, the stone head, the dragon bones. This time, this is also where our stairs assets are located. And instead of steps of 3, the stairs now go up in steps of 4. This makes sense considering the height is now governed by approximately 1/4 what it was before. We have stamps for our roads, a little bit of Z fighting in the editor, but these are objects and not tiles. Something called low outdoor, which includes more of the assets from Smile Game Builder, just categorized differently. And water. That's right, we have default water assets. It places a huge amount of water on your map in object form, so you can provide your players with this either overlay or fill in an entire ravine. And since these are objects, these will be very easy to edit and make appear or not appear using events. We have a lot more to go, so let's keep going. We have rocks and stones this time. Some high res, high poly rocks for your use. A ton of assets for indoor. It looks like you've got plenty for a farm, beautiful paintings for a haunted house, flagons and benches for a tavern, kitchen assets, and things simply get placed on countertops correctly. You can even stack items. I just stacked this hammer on top of this apple, and I just stacked that bottle on top of that hammer. This is going to make creating new terrain, new scenes, new maps so much more intuitive, and it's going to unlock so many ideas for people. Now with this item stacking implemented, we've also got HD indoor, although these look just like the Smile Game Builder assets, which means they're lower res and lower poly. We have assets now for ruins. Actually, we'll just go ahead and clear all those off before we continue. Yeah, that is enormous. So many assets for creating your dungeons very quickly, prototyping very quickly. We have a new subfolder called Ruins Parts, and that will allow us to create ruins in a more precise fashion. We have a folder for 3D monster models, and it looks like Smile Game Builder. And it looks like RPG developer BAKIN is bringing new IPs to the table here. You can easily see the material properties of these new monsters. We have access to way more than just the diffuse maps for our models, and we have a lot more assets for placeholding in a very interesting new style. Look at this ghost. Let's keep going. We actually have access to the 3D weapon models as well. We can place them right on the map. I'm actually pretty sure these are the same models used for the weapons that the characters can wield, so it's extremely interesting to be able to place these directly on the map. Now we're going to click on the Particles menu, and we don't get thumbnails in the version that I'm using, but we do still get the preview, so let's see what some of these look like. Ooh. So this is the Aura of Devil, and I would like to test to see if the scale works on these particle effects. And the scale does work on these particle effects. So you can scale the Devil Aura out to cover up your entire map if you wish, or only a section of it. A battle effect that disappeared as soon as I placed it down, but a very impressive one. We'll turn the grid off, show you the Heal particle effect, the Chant Magic, and Magma particle effects. I believe this is supposed to be placed over lava. The Flames of Darkness, Cloud. I imagine you can make great use of these clouds. No more having to import an FBX model of a cloud that's raised high above the map and struggle with the shadows that it casts in Smile Game Builder. We've got options for chimney smoke, sparks, rock destruction, the light of a firefly. That's really pretty. 2 versions of this, actually. Light on a lake, just regular light. The glowing panel. Hey, it's our old buddy, the character selector panel. Sand cloud. Under the waterfall. 2 versions. Above the waterfall. 2 versions. Sunlight. This is God rays, and they actually have motion. They are moving. Now, there are some JRPG creators that really love their God rays, so I know that they'll be excited to be able to use those. And explosion. Fog. Something called fairy light, which is similar to the fireflies. We now have one for birds. I placed this down and waited a few seconds, and now I see that birds are appearing high above the map. So you actually have a particle effect that just introduces little 2D bird sprites that fly above your map. And one more for fog. There are actually a few more folders here, one for uncategorized, and that allows us to see a 2D sprite on this 3D map. Again, this comes with the engine, and the sprite is billboard, so you can see it rotating with the camera angle. I think that about does it for the map editor. Of course, we do have our events, and you're able to select from several events and place them down, and then the event editor will appear in simple form. We'll go over that in another episode, but for now, I hope you enjoyed this overview of the map editor. Please stay tuned for more BAKIN tutorials and overviews, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.